Have you ever stopped to consider that humanity's greatest tragedies may not be accidents, but rather events foreseen by civilizations that dominated time and the cosmos? What if I told you that, long before any ship left Europe, the wise men of Africa already knew and recorded their people's destiny of pain and glory? For centuries, we've been taught that Black history begins with slavery, theft, trauma, and oblivion. But what if the truth were otherwise? What if this unspeakable suffering were actually the darkest phase of an ancient prophecy? A map of resilience and triumph written on the banks of the Nile. Delve with us into the mystery of the setting sun papyrus, the secret text said to detail the Great Crossing, the sleep of Horus, and the inevitable resurrection of the African spirit. This is not just a documentary. It is the beginning of an ancient revelation, proving that the legacy of Kemet and Kush is immortal. Prepare for a journey through lost hieroglyphics, occult rituals, and the unbreakable strength of a people who, despite their dispersion, carried with them the key to a new era. The history you know is incomplete. Are you ready to connect the dots and awaken Horus? If this quest for wisdom resonates with you, subscribe to the channel now, turn on notifications, and leave a comment telling us where in the world you're hearing this ancient story from. The truth is about to be revealed. At the dawn of human civilization, along the fertile banks of the Nile River, two empires of unparalleled power and wisdom flourished: Kemet, ancient Egypt, and its powerful neighbor to the south, Kush. This was not just a map of lands. It was a map of advanced minds, where astrology and architecture met to read the destiny of the cosmos and humanity. It was said that everything important for the future was engraved in stone, papyrus, or more secretly, in the spiritual memory of its priests and scribes. The Nile Valley was the epicenter, where the stars were studied not out of curiosity, but as an instruction manual for life and the centuries to come, the starting point of a prophecy many have forgotten. Amid sphinxes and colossally constructed temples, the idea that the future could be known and recorded was as natural as the Nile's own flood cycle, the guarantee of life. Within the shadows of these majestic pyramids, the ancients guarded not only material treasures, but also treasures of knowledge. The relationship between Kemet and Kush, often one of union and sometimes of conflict, formed a single stream of ancient knowledge, the source from which flowed the most profound wisdom of ancient Africa. The wisdom of these two kingdoms, one north and one south of the Nile, was the key to understanding the destiny of the people of Tarseti, the land of the bow. They were masters of a knowledge so profound that it could foresee disorder, Isfet, before it took shape, thus being the stage for the first great prediction. In the temples of Karnak and the pyramids of Meroe, priests and priestesses read the signs, interpreting celestial movements and prophetic dreams as open texts about the future journey of their descendants. It was a world where cosmology was history, and history was foreshadowing. This is the geographic and spiritual context from which, centuries later, the most powerful and feared prophecy about Black people would emerge. However, no matter how hard they tried to preserve knowledge, there are always forces that try to bury the truth in the sands of time. And the guardians of the Nile knew that the most crucial part of this prophecy would have to travel, not on papyrus, but in spirit. The question remained, what could be so important that it would be guarded for millennia and so feared that it would need to be nearly erased from history? For the ancient civilizations of the Nile, time did not flow in a straight line like an arrow, but revolved in vast cosmic cycles, like the waters of the great river that always return to their source, ensuring the harvest. This cyclical and eternal vision of time allowed the sages to look at the past not as something distant, but as a mirror of the future, where great lessons and great destinies were repeated. Prophecy for them was not divination, but the recognition of divine patterns in the perpetual cycle of creation. The concept of Sankofa, common to many African cultures, meaning to return and seek, is key to understanding how these prophecies worked. Because to know what will come, one must first understand what has been and what has been lost. The priests saw future events not as inevitable, but as challenges to the maintenance of the cosmic order, Ma'at. They understood that every action in the present echoed centuries into the future, and therefore, the destiny of the people must be known and protected. This interconnected time mentality allowed the ancient seers to observe the ages to come, not only the glory days, but also the long periods of darkness and dispersion that would befall the descendants of Kemet and Cush. They felt the pain of separation and oblivion even before it happened, seeking ways to plant seeds of wisdom that would sprout only when the time was ripe for harvest, so that the truth would not be lost. Thus, the hidden prophecy concerning black people was not a portent of doom, but a map of resilience, a coded guide for spiritual survival through centuries of imbalance and suffering, prepared for the time when the world of Mahat would be threatened. Knowledge of the future was, in fact, a gift of strength and a responsibility for those who came after, and it was with this profound understanding of the cycle of time that they recorded the first enigmatic signs, warning of a rupture in harmony that would come from a place of shadow, a darkness that would move over the waters and take with it the hope of an entire civilization. But what exactly did these ancient texts say about the great catastrophe? The first signs were not in large inscriptions on the pyramids, but in small passages, in religious papyri and funerary texts rarely shown to the public, stored deep within libraries. They were coded warnings, interspersed with hymns to the gods and descriptions of the soul's journey, like a message within a message. They spoke of the long night that would swallow the Nile and scatter its children. One of these fragments, shrouded in mystery, described the moment when the sun would depart from its home in the south, and that the tongue of the ancestors would be cut off by the tongue of the pale-skinned invader. These were not immediate historical facts, but cosmic warnings. Ancestral wisdom, realizing the fragility of empires, attempted to encapsulate destiny in symbols difficult to decipher, so that only the initiated could understand what was to come. The most compelling warning came from what is known as the teachings of Amenemope, where, amidst counsel of wisdom, there was a veiled paragraph about a time of great crossing when the people of the fertile land would reap salt and suffering. These texts, which have partially survived, hint that prophecy was part of the moral and spiritual education of early leaders. The presence of these fragments underscores one thing: the spiritual elite of Kemet and Cush were fully aware that their civilization would fall, and that their descendants would face a calamity of epic proportions. They were not merely documenting the past, they were actively trying to shape the future. The prophecy, then, was not an isolated document, but a web of scattered warnings. The question that haunts researchers is why these texts were so well hidden, and why the guardians of knowledge allowed most of them to be lost to time. Perhaps the answer lies in the messenger himself, the central figure who carried the weight of this revelation, the keeper of all this pain. The heart of this story lies in the figure of a forgotten protagonist, not a pharaoh or a king, but a supreme scribe or a high-ranking priest, the one charged with compiling and protecting the fragments of the prophecy. Let's call him Neb-Ankhet, meaning Lord of Life, a title that reflects the importance of his mission. He not only wrote, he mediated between the divine and the human, receiving visions. Neb-Ankhet was a master of hieroglyphics, which to him were not just letters, but energetic portals. He dedicated his life to deciphering the celestial signs and dreams of the pharaohs, uniting the scattered pieces of the great prediction into a single, cohesive, and dangerously revealing text. He felt the weight of centuries in his hands. Knowing he was recording future doom, the narrative of his life would be the very journey of prophecy. He witnessed the first signs of decline, the weakening of Ma'at in the kingdom, and the growing influence of the Isfet. His struggle was not against armies, but against time and oblivion, ensuring that the key scroll, the papyrus of the setting sun, was hidden in a hard-to-reach place, out of sight of future desecrators. His task required extreme sacrifice. He had to encode the papyrus with symbols so enigmatic that they would protect it from any superficial reading, ensuring that only those with the correct spiritual lineage could one day decipher it. Neb-Ankhet knew that the pure truth could be destroyed, but the encoded truth would survive, for it was part of the magical tapestry. The legend of Neb-Ankhet and the papyrus of the setting sun is not just the story of one man. It is proof that African ancestry actively sought to protect its descendants, giving them a secret map to awakening. But for the prophecy to become a guide, it first needed to contextualize the nature of the darkness to come. The struggle between order and chaos. At the heart of Kemetic cosmology was Ma'at, the goddess of truth, justice, order, and balance, the very foundation upon which the universe and society were to be built. The ideal life was the pursuit of maintaining Ma'at. However, opposing her was Isfeti, the primordial force of chaos, injustice and disorder, ever lurking, seeking to destroy harmony. The hidden prophecy saw the coming great tragedy not merely as a political or social event, but as a temporary and terrible triumph of Isfet over Ma'at, a cosmic imbalance of global proportions. The fate of black people then was tied to the eternal struggle between these two forces. They would be the front line on the battlefield of the spirit. The prophecy warned that Isfet would use greed, ignorance, and violence to create the Great Crossing, an act of dispersion aimed at disrupting the spiritual balance of the people. Isfet's goal was not only to enslave bodies, but more importantly, to erase the memory of Ma'at and the connection to ancestry. But the beauty of the prophecy lay in the fact that suffering itself would be the seed of Ma'at's resistance. Geographical dispersion would ensure that wisdom would not be concentrated in one place. Fragments of truth would be carried away, hidden in new lands, waiting for the right moment to re-emerge and restore balance. The scribe Nebanket recorded these events in symbolic detail, painting scenes of great anguish, but also of unshakable spiritual survival. He used the language of the gods, so that the message would be eternal and charged with power. But what concrete signs did he use to describe the forced journey? To ensure the setting sun papyrus survived destruction and malicious reinterpretation, Nebanket employed an intricate tapestry of symbols and codes, blending the languages of astronomy, fauna, and mythology into his prediction. The great salt water that would swallow the ships was undoubtedly the ocean, the Atlantic, but the description was poetic to mislead. He described the oppressor as the iron bird that flies without wings, a likely reference to the slave, ships with their metal or wooden sails that seemed to defy nature, and his cargo as the lament of the lotus flower, a representation of African beauty and purity taken captive. The meaning was hidden between the lines. Another crucial code was the sleep of Horus, which symbolized the period when the divine consciousness and ancestral memory of the people would lie dormant, captive to imposed ignorance. The prophecy warned of the need to awaken this inner Horus, the force of resistance, and the memory of Ma'at, for liberation to be complete. These symbols ensured that the text could be read across time and culture, but that its essence was only revealed when suffering was great and the need for reconnection was urgent. The wisdom lay not in the literal word, but in the spiritual resonance the symbol evoked in its descendants. The use of this double language, literal and symbolic, was a hallmark of African wisdom, a way to protect the deeper truth from minds seeking only power and domination. But how were these secret teachings kept alive as empires began to crumble and official history changed? Over time, the Nile empires weakened, invasions became frequent, and the knowledge that had once belonged to all began to fragment and be hidden. This was the silent period in prophecy, the long winter when the light of Ma'at seemed to have faded in the lands of Kemet and Kush. The scroll of the setting sun was buried, and its memory became but a whisper. Forgetting was a survival tactic. It was safer for the people to remain unaware of such a terrifying future, focusing instead on surviving the present. But for the remaining guardians, the challenge was to ensure the prophecy was not destroyed, nor corrupted nor used to create despair, but rather hope. Many ancient texts were intentionally burned or stolen by invaders who didn't understand their value, interested only in gold and territorial power, ignoring the wealth of ancient knowledge stored within. Official history, rewritten by the victors, had no room for the profound wisdom that foresaw their own rise and fall. However, knowledge does not die. It transforms. As temples fell into ruins, prophecy shifted from papyrus to oral tradition, from hieroglyphics to rhythms and chants. It buried itself in the soul of the people, awaiting the moment to be reactivated, like a seed in the desert. This sleep phase was crucial. It would test the true spiritual strength of the scattered people. But the question is, how exactly did they ensure that the essence of prophecy, its power to awaken, survived through such everyday and secret practices? The survival of prophecy depended on its transformation from sacred text to sacred practice. From hieroglyphic to movement, knowledge migrated to rituals, circle dancing, campfire stories, and crucially, to divination systems such as Ifa. These became the new guardians of the secret. Priests and spiritual leaders spread across different kingdoms in Africa, created mnemonic codes and symbols on their garments and cult objects. These symbols, which at first glance seemed merely art, actually contained entire phrases from the papyrus of the setting sun. Transmission was done secretly, from master to initiate, never openly. One of the most effective methods was the use of music and rhythm. Talking drums became the new libraries, where complex polyrhythms represented the syllables and flow of prophecy, allowing the message to cross borders and survive oppression, for music is a universal and untraceable language. In spiritual ceremonies, myths were enacted with details that activated ancestral memory, recalling the Great Crossing and the sleep of Horus without ever using explicit words. It was a way of planting the prophecy in the collective unconscious of the people, so that when the moment arrived, it would blossom naturally. This secret transmission network ensured that, even when the people were forced into diaspora, their most sacred knowledge, the map of their identity, would travel with them. And it is precisely this forced journey, the core of their pain, that the prophecy described most terrifyingly and beautifully. The central point of the hidden prophecy was the description of the Great Crossing, the forced journey across the great salt water that would tear apart Africa and scatter its children to unknown lands. Nebanket in his papyrus did not use the term slavery, but described a great fall of Ma'at, where life would be treated as a commodity. He described the crowded, iron birds, the smell of salt and the constant wailing of the captives, the loss of the original language, and the forced erasure of the gods' names. The prophecy was an emotional record of the trauma to come, a foretaste of the pain of uprooting and the loss of identity in the new land, the cold land. The text warned of unspeakable suffering, violence, and attempts to crush the spirit, but crucially it also contained a message of hope. The dispersion was not the end, but a great rooting. The African seed would be planted in new soil, where it would sprout new forms of resistance and spirituality. The vision was clear. This tragic event, though caused by the Isfet, would serve to spread the African light throughout the world, ensuring that the knowledge of Ma'at could never again be extinguished by a single invasion. The prophecy transformed the catastrophe into a cosmic seeding event. The secret keeper knew the people would need to understand that their suffering was not in vain, but part of a greater plan for global spiritual survival. But what did the prophecy say about the inherent strength that would allow them to withstand centuries of oppression? The revelation of spiritual strength and resilience, the most inspiring part of the prophecy, carefully reserved for awakening, was the revelation of the unbreakable strength of the spirit of the children of Africa, which not even the great saltwater could drown. Nebanket wrote that the fire of the sun that dwells in them cannot be extinguished by foreign water. This resilience was not physical, but purely spiritual, the power to maintain connection with ancestors and gods even under the greatest tyranny. The prophetic text asserted that the memory of Africa would be preserved in the rhythms of the heart, the movements of dance and the secret form of praising the sacred. The prophecy assured that, in the new lands, new oracles, new drums would emerge, representing the voice of Africa in the diaspora, creating new forms of spirituality that would keep the link with Ma'at alive. Adaptation and the creation of hybrid cultures would be living proof of the resilience of their legacy. The destiny of black people, according to the text, was to serve as a beacon of light, showing the world that true freedom lies not in the body, but in the mind and soul, and that wisdom does not bend to steel. They would be the masters of cultural reinvention. The prophecy was, therefore, an injection of ancient power, a reminder that they were not alone, and that the lineage of Kemet and Cush was with them, waiting only for the moment of Horus's awakening. But was this destiny known only in Africa? The mystery deepens when we consider that the hidden prophecy may have had echoes in distant civilizations, suggesting shared knowledge among ancient peoples about the great migrations and the future of humanity. There are hints of lost legends that speak of wise men of the south who would bring light to the lands of the west. In Olmec oral legends in Mesoamerica, for example, There are references to dark-skinned divine figures who came from the sea, carrying with them the wisdom of astronomy and construction, perhaps an ancient harbinger of African migration in different eras. Could African prophecy be part of a greater universal knowledge? The setting sun papyrus mentioned a sign in the constellation of the dog, Sirius, which would have been recognized by peoples beyond the Nile, suggesting that the stars were the common map for prophecy and that other ancient sages also monitored the journey of the sons of the sun. Africa's history, perhaps, is linked to global destiny. What is being challenged is the narrative of isolation. The idea that Africa was disconnected from the rest of the ancient world is overturned by this vision of interconnected prophecies, where different cultures predicted the same great catastrophe and the dispersion of the wise men. The truth is that trade routes weren't just about goods. They were routes of knowledge and prophecy, and the certainty that the African seed would spread was an open secret among initiates on different continents. But the final destination, the Americas, was the most closely discussed. At the heart of the setting sun, papyrus was the enigmatic and detailed section on the eye. Children of the sun who will journey west, the clear description of the crossing to the Americas, the lands where the sun sets. The prophecy saw the West not as a tomb, but as a testing ground for African wisdom. This part of the text described how, in these new lands, black people would be forced to interact with other cultures, creating a powerful new spiritual and cultural synthesis. The blending of bloodlines and beliefs was seen as the creation of a new flame that would illuminate the modern world. The guardian Neb Ankhet warned that it would be in these lands that the sleep of Horus would be deepest, but also the quickest awakening. The intense oppression would drive the people to seek even more fervently the memory of their ancestors, activating the prophecy. The journey west was the final catalyst for the prophecy. The diaspora was the way to ensure that Mahat's legacy would become global, being the foundation of the music, art, and struggle for justice that would emerge centuries later on foreign soil. The mystery wasn't the journey itself, but its purpose, to take the essence of Africa to the furthest point from its origin, to ensure it would return stronger. But what does official history do with such explosive and revealing knowledge? The narrative becomes even more intriguing with the mention of hypothetical, yet plausible, modern archaeological discoveries that revive interest in hidden prophecies, as if Mother Africa herself were speaking through the sand again. Imagining an archaeologist finding a clay tablet with cryptic inscriptions is the perfect hook. The setting sun papyrus may not have been found in its entirety, but small fragments carried by traders or pilgrims could be hidden in private collections or less explored museums, far from the gaze of official science. The discovery of a text that predates the tragedy would be proof. Imagine the thrill of finding a small ebony box in Meroe, containing a copper plate with symbols detailing the iron bird that flies, confirming Neb Ankhet's foresight. This discovery would force a reinterpretation of all African and diasporic history. These discoveries serve as bridges between the mythical past and our historical reality, demonstrating that ancestral wisdom is factual and not just legend. They prove that the story we've been told is only a fraction of what really happened. The mere possibility of an intact prophetic text calls into question the chronology of history. Is the fate of black people not a reaction to events, but the fulfillment of a much older plan? And how do these texts influence modern faith? The hidden prophecy, even in fragments or oral form, served as a spiritual anchor for the formation of new religions and black resistance movements around the world. The idea of a grand destiny, of a people chosen to suffer and be reborn, became the driving force of faith. Movements like Rastafari, which see Ethiopia as the refuge of ancestry and Babylon as the land of oppression, resonate directly with the themes of the fall of Ma'at and the great return promised by Neb Ankhet. They fulfill prophecy by keeping hope alive. The resurgence of Kemetic practices, or the appreciation of African-based religions in the diaspora, such as Candomblé and Vodou, are the awakening of Horus that the prophecy foretold. The people are actively seeking buried wisdom, restoring their connection with the ancient gods. These interpretations are not merely religious. They are acts of cultural and spiritual sovereignty, a recovery of stolen dignity. They transform pain into power, captivity into mission, and oblivion into active memory, living the prophetic text. The legacy of prophecy is, therefore, the foundation of a new consciousness, where the struggle for social justice is, essentially, the struggle to restore cosmic order, Ma'at in the world, fulfilling the final phase of prophesied destiny. But this awakening confronts established history. The hidden prophecy is a historical time bomb. If proven, it directly challenges the Eurocentric narrative that portrays Africa as passive, historyless, and dependent on external intervention. The prophecy proves that Africa knew. Official history prefers to view slavery as a historical accident or an economic necessity, never as a foreseeable cosmic event that somehow served a greater spiritual purpose of dispersing wisdom. Ancestral knowledge is dangerous to the established order. The conflict is profound. It's the opposition between the history written in Western libraries and the history sung in the toreros, between the cold document and the warm memory. The prophecy demands that we rewrite not only the history of Africa, but the history of humanity. Those who wield the power of knowledge have a vested interest in keeping the setting sun papyrus hidden, for it reveals that Black people have a destiny forged by their own ancestors, not by external forces. The prophecy is a manifesto of self-determination. The discovery and acceptance of this ancient knowledge would be the act of awakening of Horus on a global scale, forcing modern civilization to recognize that the source of wisdom lies not where it was thought, but in the ruins of Kemet and Kush. But the path to unity is not easy. The prophecy also contained a warning, a condition for final glory. The reascension phase would only be fulfilled when the scattered children of the sun recognized each other and united their forces, overcoming the barriers of nation, language, and faith created by the oppressor. Neb Ankhet predicted that the Isfet would continue to operate subtly, sowing the seeds of distrust and disunity between Black people in the diaspora and those who remained on the continent. The greatest challenge would be overcoming internal divisions. The text spoke of the need to gather the dry bones and give them life, a metaphor for rebuilding a unified cultural and spiritual identity. The prophecy demands a journey back, both physically and metaphorically, to the source of wisdom. The journey of awakening is not merely intellectual, but requires a profound spiritual transformation, the rejection of imposed masks, and the acceptance of one's ancestral heritage in its entirety, with all its responsibilities. The destination is clear, but the path is a trial by fire. Unity would be the master key so that the cycle of suffering could finally be broken, and the final phase of the prophecy, the most glorious, could fully manifest. The final and most hopeful section of the Setting Sun Papyrus describes the reascension phase, a time of cultural, economic, and spiritual resurgence for Black people, the triumph of Ma'at over the long night of Isfet. This is the future promised by the ancestors. The prophecy predicts that with the awakening of Horus and the union of the dispersed, Africa will once again be a source of light and knowledge for the world, sharing the wisdom that has been protected through centuries of suffering. It will be a time of justice and restored cosmic balance. The text mentions the emergence of new pharaohs, not of lineage but of spirit, leaders who will bring peace and development, honoring the principles of Ma'at in a modern world. Glory will not be a copy of the past, but a new and more powerful manifestation. This phase of reascension is not just for Africa. Prophecy suggests that the awakening of Black people will be the catalyst for global transformation, a reminder to all humanity of the importance of truth, justice, and balance. The message is a beacon. Suffering had a term and a purpose, and the future is a return to ancestral glory, where African wisdom becomes the foundation of the New World Order. But the influence of this knowledge is not only future, it is also present. The hidden prophecy is silently fulfilled through the undeniable influence of African culture and the diaspora, which has secretly shaped the art, music, philosophy, and even politics of the modern world. The seed planted in the Great Crossing has borne global fruit. Jazz, blues, rock and roll, samba, reggae. These forms of expression are not just entertainment. They are, according to ancestral wisdom, the manifestation of the energy of prophecy, the rhythm of Ma'at's resistance that refuses to be silenced. They are the language of the fire of the sun, philosophies of resistance, the pursuit of civil rights, the appreciation of community, and the emphasis on spirituality as a driving force all echo the teachings of Ma'at and the call to awaken. Prophecy became the matrix of the struggle for liberation. The world consumes African and diaspora culture without, often recognizing that it is consuming the prophetic legacy of Kemet and Kush itself, proof that wisdom was not confined to the pyramids, but traveled with the people. This influence is proof that the prophecy was partially fulfilled, demonstrating that the scattered people not only survived, but became the most potent cultural force on the planet. What remains for us is to connect the dots and understand the full legacy. The ultimate legacy of the hidden prophecy is not an object, but the immortal persistence of African culture and lineage that has survived centuries of erasure and oppression, proving that spirit is stronger than matter. It is the celebration of a spiritual victory, the wisdom of the Nile, encoded in myths, dances, and cultural genetics itself, is the world's richest heritage, the foundation from which so many forms of knowledge have sprung, from mathematics to spirituality. Prophecy is the greatest testimony to the self-sufficiency and intellectual depth of African civilizations, which not only built empires, but also planned for the spiritual survival of their descendants in a future of calamity. The papyrus of the setting sun and its message, even if only partially known, is a call to responsibility. The past gave you the tools. It is up to the present to use them to build the reascension. This is the power of ancestry, a force that transcends death and time, ensuring that the cycle of Ma'at, though temporarily broken, will always be restored. But history is still being written. We've reached the end of the papyrus of the setting sun's journey, but the story of the prophecy doesn't end there. The big revelation is that the prophecy isn't about what will happen, but about what is happening now. At this very moment, the awakening of Horus. If the ancestors of Kemet and Kush had the power to see centuries ahead, to foresee the pain and glory of their descendants, what does this tell us about the depth and power of African wisdom that has been denied to us? The outcome of the hidden prophecy is an open door. The time of suffering has ended, and the time of reascension is in full swing. But it depends on our consciousness, our unity, and our search for this forgotten wisdom. The great final reflection is a provocation. What else has been hidden or forgotten by official history? And what are we waiting for to go and seek our complete heritage, buried in the sands of time and in the rhythm of our hearts? The knowledge that came from the Nile awaits you, and Guardian Neb-Ankhet has fulfilled his mission. The next phase of the prophecy, the glory of Ma'at, is an open book for our generation to write.